A cold montage opens, sky charts, survey frames, a trace tag 3, I divided by Atlas, sliding between star fields. Old headlines flare and vanish, mystery object, impossible orbit, silent rock. The narrator clears the smoke. The drama is not an incoming threat. The turn is quieter and sharper. First guesses missed. What looked inert is venting. A faint coma thickens. A needle tail steadies. Light behaves like ice under stress, not stone under sunshine. Being wrong here does not equal being unsafe. It means the model yields. Tiny jets whisper off the nucleus, giving a non-gravitational nudge that stains clean predictions. One tidy rule after another blurs. Phase behavior, volatile mix, surface texture. The visitor owes nothing to our glossaries. Each measurement wrinkles the script. Each revision trades pride for accuracy. The cosmos is not hostile, only more intricate than our shortcuts allowed. Outside the domes, a louder chorus grows, stapling a famous physicist's name to captions built for panic. The film pins its stance before the noise sets the frame. Worse will mean worse for simplicity, not for Earth. 2 milestones anchor the arc perihelion in late October 2025 and a distant Earth passage in mid-December. Between them, the job is spare and stubborn. Separate spectacle from data, then ask, without favor, what the data say. Interstellar visitors are few enough to count on one hand. Oumuamua tagged 1I in 2017, bent clean gravity without flying a flag of gas. Borisov, labeled 2I in 2019, restored textbook comfort with a generous coma. Now 3I divided by Atlas arrives as a third chapter, dynamically interstellar yet physically comet-like, a body that writes with dust and faint gas while reminding modelers that the syllabus is not finished. Rarity sets the stakes. These objects were forged beneath other suns, kept in deep cold and sandblasted by time. Their ices remember pressures and temperatures our system does not offer. Each pass is a once-only seminar. Composition, grain, physics, and thermal history must be inferred before the guest fades. Miss a window and the file closes. Meet it, and a guess can harden into a constraint with citations. Discovery is industrial. Wide-field surveys rake the sky, subtracting yesterday from tonight to catch subtle motion. Brokers elevate candidates. The Minor Planet Center gathers reports. Orbit solvers publish ephemerides that attract follow-up. Within days, scattered dots become a curve. Within weeks, the curve declares excess speed that no bound orbit can explain. Interstellar is first a dynamical verdict. Physical identity arrives later at the detector. For most eyes, 3I divided by Atlas will never lift above city glow. Predicted magnitudes sit below naked eye reach, and geometry is unkind. Solar elongation can be modest. Phase angle can mute contrast. Coma spreads light across sky rather than concentrating it into a point. Twilight haze, low altitude, and a bright moon compound the loss, hiding a real comet inside a frame that looks like nothing much at all. Observability becomes choreography. Professionals plan around elongation, air mass, and lunar glare, booking spectrographs when gas lines are favored and fast imagers when dust dominates. Amateurs donate cadence, stacking long exposures to tease out the tail, timing photometry to test for rotational flicker. Between them, the campaign stitches a light curve wider than weather and an astrometric spine strong enough for honest orbits. Timeline, not hype, governs expectation. Approaching perihelion in late October 2025, volatile ices wake and jets sharpen, nudging brightness beyond geometry. After the turn, the comet dims, but viewing improves. Earth ward sight lines steady, and precise positions trim residuals in the fit. The lesson echoed from 1I and 2I remains intact. The interstellar label comes from motion, but nature is read in photons, one measured count at a time. The switch flips without spectacle. As 3I divided by Atlas drops sunward, the point source softens and a hairline plume steadies along the anti-solar line. Brightness slips off the neat script of distance and phase. Activity has begun not as a siren, but as a pressure trace in light. A nucleus that once looked quiet now exhales, and that exhalation turns sunlight into a small, persistent shove that models must name. Perihelion in late October 2025 sets the tempo. Before the turn, teams chase early gas, where sky background still claws at signal. After the turn, geometry calms and astrometry tightens. The plan is a baton pass across hemispheres and apertures, small telescopes for cadence, large mirrors for spectra, and opportunistic radar if the angles smile. Every window is scheduled. Every gap is a risk to be managed. Objective 1 is chemistry that speaks in lines. Spectrographs hunt water, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide, then listen for minor species that redraw the family tree. Ratios carry memory. Cold nurseries preserve carbon monoxide. Shallow crusts favor water at modest heat. Dust color traces grain size and coatings. A reddening slope hints at organics or fine particles. Each detection narrows where and how this body took shape. Objective 2 is motion under pressure. Once jets fire, gravity no longer owns the whole plot. Orbit fits adopt non-gravitational terms, so residuals will behave. Analysts test thermal lag, reweight measurements, and prune seductive outliers born of thin cloud or bloated seeing. The reward is trust, a prediction that lands the target on chips and a curve that breathes honestly rather than pretending to be exact. Objective 3 is comparison across stars. Oumuamua offered a push without a coma. Borisov delivered a classical comet from elsewhere. 3I divided by Atlas may thread the two histories or split them again. Grain porosity, gas production curves, and any rotational flicker become passports stamped by an alien formation zone. If patterns break once more, textbooks must trade typologies for a spectra of behavior wide enough to house the unexpected. Execution is its own science. Pipelines tame flats and darks, nail 0 points, and annotate sky with a candor that survives audit. Standards are shared, filters synchronized, and seeing logged rather than excused. Amateur networks stretch the timeline, stacking faint frames through weather to keep the light curve unbroken. What cannot be observed is modeled. What cannot be modeled is labeled as such and left intact. Communication is a parallel objective. The film pins terms before rumor does. Worse here will mean worse for simplicity, not for Earth. If a curve bends, the narration shows the force term that straightens it. If an error band widens, the audience sees which knight moved the needle. By the time 3I divided by Atlas clears perihelion and glides toward his distant Earth passage, viewers should know what changed, what held, and what remains to be earned. Routine frames begin to misbehave. A crisp point swells into a pale halo, and a hairline tail etches across the star field. Photometry slips from the tidy script of distance and phase. Notes in the log: turn careful. Activity present. The visitor is not a dry shard. It is awake enough to reshape light and, by a whisper, to revise its own path. Brightness ought to bow to geometry. Instead, it leans away. The rise on approach runs too fast, then stalls, then resumes. Phase corrections soothe but do not heal. The curve looks less like a lamp, fading with range, and more like a valve that opens in fits. Dust production appears gated, perhaps by cracks that breathe with heat or facets that catch the sun in turn. Deep stacks sharpen the coma's asymmetry. Isophotes slant, sunward is tight, while antisolar strands smear into a narrow plume. Simple grain bins underpredict tail length unless an abundance of fine particles is allowed. The fit improves when a preferred jet direction is added. The narrative tilts from passive sublimation toward a crude nozzle that shifts but does not wander without cause. Astrometry mounts, and with it, stubborn residuals. A gravity-only solution trails the data by small, persistent steps. The orbit behaves when a non-gravitational term is admitted, a compact stand-in for thrust from jets. Thermal lag models give a further lift, explaining why the push peaks after local noon. Residuals shrink, not to zero, but to a level that keeps telescopes on target. Anomaly 1 lives in the light curve. The flicker refuses a steady period. If simple rotation drove the brightness, peaks would march evenly. Instead, they slip, as if rival sources take turns. A precessing jet, a lumpy nucleus, or both can smear the rhythm. The team publishes ranges, not a single answer. Elegance is traded for honesty the data can bear. Color adds texture and doubt. Early runs lean neutral, later sets tilt redder. If grains are small and dressed in organics, the slope makes sense. If gas dominates, it should flatten. The changing palette suggests a blend that moves or grain sizes that sort with distance from the source. Either way, the comfort of a single recipe thins under scrutiny. Spectra from larger mirrors clip in. Water lines flirt with detection, while carbon monoxide whispers more clearly. A carbon monoxide lead at this distance would point to colder birthplaces or to layered crusts that ration water. Anomaly 2 is measured. Not dramatic, ratios that wobble with time, as if stratavent out of sequence and the comet sheds one skin after another. Morphology follows. Syndyne and synchrone maps match only if ejection starts earlier than inert models allow. That hints at preheated layers or trapped volatiles burping through weak seams. Overlaid epochs reveal a faint kink in the tail that migrates. A steady nucleus would not paint that bend. A turning jet could. The plot leans toward torque, reshaping the spin state over weeks. Polarimetry adds a fine line of ink. The degree of polarization sits lower than in many inter-system comets, hinting at compact or smoother grains. Anomaly 3 is technical yet consequential. Grain physics sets how sunlight becomes pressure and how pressure becomes lateral force. Lower polarization aligns with a steady, modest shove that orbit fits already require. Outbursts appear where the audience expects spectacle, yet they remain modest. A few nights show step gains that deepen the coma without spraying knots. Solar wind data tempts a parallel, and correlations are tested. Some bumps ride a gust, others ignore it. The lesson is simple and sobering. Space weather contributes, but the nucleus keeps agency over its mood. Peeling the coma from the core becomes craft. Point spread functions are matched and subtracted. Apertures scale with seeing. Sky backgrounds are sampled beyond the tail. The result is not a portrait of the nucleus, but bounds on its size. Within those bounds, the spin remains elusive. Several shapes and rates fit. None is decisive. All are constraints worth keeping. Radar would answer in an evening, but geometry proves unkind. Lacking it, cadence substitutes for clarity. Small telescopes feed a drumbeat of positions to police drift. Large mirrors build spectra when the coma cooperates. Together they trade glamour for coverage. Coverage keeps models truthful and turns weather from a spoiler into noise that can be averaged down. Comparison stabilized thought. Borisov behaved like a classical comet with generous gas and reliable lines. Oumuamua forced acceptance of a shove without a coma to credit it. 3, I divided by Atlas, sits between and refuses peace. It shows gas yet needs forced terms. It shows dust yet leans on fine grains. It obeys gravity, then edits it. Each contrast widens what interstellar may mean. Communication threads every night. Fits are published with caveats, plots with residuals, spectra with limits. The word worse earns its keep only when pinned to a model that fails. Worse for single law brightness, worse for one period rotation, worse for assuming carbon monoxide as a footnote. The film escorts that usage carefully away from fear and toward precision. A ledger of costs grows alongside the data. Each anomaly demands more telescope time, more cautious calibration, more patient modeling. Pipelines that handle quiet comets gain branches for interstellar quirks. The penalty is paid in sleepless hours and in the humility of revision when a neat fit dissolves. The dividend is a catalog line that does not lie, even when it complicates. The stack is not a pile of errors. It is a scaffold. A gated light curve argues for structure under the crust. A migrating kink argues for torque and changing spin. A carbon monoxide lead argues for deeper, cold, and layered storage. Lower polarization argues for smooth or compact grains pushed steadily by light. No single clue holds dominion. The sketch emerges in concert. By sequence end, the traveler is no longer a rumor with an ephemeris. It is a case file with habits. Models bend without breaking. The orbit carries a small, declared bias from jets. Light carries color and structure that evolve across nights. The team is not ashamed of early guesses. They are relieved to be less wrong now and ready to be corrected again tomorrow. The camera pulls back to the simple arc. Perihelion lies behind. A distant Earth passage lies ahead. Between them, the comet keeps teaching by being inconvenient. The audience has learned a vocabulary, residuals, phase functions, non-gravitational terms, not for show, but for accuracy. Precision is the antidote to spectacle and the bridge to restraint. One last check stitches, method to meaning. If the non-gravitational term softens as activity wanes, thrust models earn their keep. If color slopes stabilize with geometry, the grain mix can be caged. If spectra settle their ratios, formation clues will graduate from rumor to record. The stack of anomalies becomes a to-do list, not a hall of mirrors. The night ends where it must, in patience. Data rates slow after the turn, yet the geometry helps. Cadence keeps the spine of positions intact. Selective spectra refine chemistry when sky cooperates. The plot refuses melodrama. Instead, it offers a steady discipline. Admit pressure where it exists, publish limits where it does not, and let the comet write the last correction in its own light. The first witness is absence. The nucleus stays cloaked inside its own haze. Deconvolved points fence its size, yet refuse a silhouette. Rotation hides in blended rhythms that never quite lock. In this quiet, the team writes bounds instead of boasts. Upper limits become scaffolding. A non-detection is not a void. It is a corridor marked no entry, narrowing where truth can still reside. Chemistry leaves deliberate blanks. Water lines hover at threshold, while carbon monoxide speaks a shade louder, but neither composes a stable hierarchy. Ratios sway from night to night, as if layers vent out of order, or grains sort themselves en route. The lack of a single dominant volatile is itself a verdict. Formation did not follow one recipe, and storage did not keep one shelf. Dust answers in halftones. Color slopes redden, then level. Polarization sits low and stubborn. Models fit only when they admit internal tension, blending compact with porous grains that change with distance from the source. The silence here is methodological. It forbids one-size conclusions and keeps multiple working hypotheses alive without theatrics. Because ambiguity, named properly, is a kind of truth. Geometry withholds shortcuts. Radar would sketch the core by dinner, but the line of sight grants no such favor. Cadence substitutes for clarity. Many small mirrors trade glamour for repetition until faint trends rise above weather and noise. Even the cleanest plot carries error bars like sutures. The film lingers on them. Stitches show where the work opened and where it healed. These restraints charge a fee and pay a dividend. The fee is patience, time on instruments, revisions to pipelines, priors wide enough to feel unsatisfying. The dividend is resilience fits that do not snap when a late point arrives, predictions that flex without theatrics. Curated silence becomes a data set with negative space, a map of what the comet refuses to be. Out of that negative space, character emerges. A nucleus still unpictured but bounded. Volatiles that trade the lead, hinting at layered cold, grains that drift between smooth and fluffy, steering how light becomes pressure and pressure becomes a sideways shove. The parting note is not frustration but discipline. Publish limits, mark uncertainties, and let what is missing narrow the path to what is real. The working resolution is plain. So 3I divided by Atlas is an interstellar comet in active phase, carrying a coma, a disciplined tail, and a measurable non-gravitational shove from jets. Orbit fits that admit this gentle pressure converge and guide recoveries to the right patch of sky. Nothing in the ephemerides signals hazard. The object is instructive, not dangerous, a verdict that keeps curiosity high while dialing drama down. Provisional does not mean fragile. It means the numbers breathe within declared bound. Analysts publish force terms beside gravity, brightness laws with caveats, and compositions as intervals rather than trophies. A model that flexes is more honest than a slogan that glitters. The door stays open for a better night to walk through and sit the previous best in a lower chair without ceremony. The first cost is time, the humankind. Residuals are negotiated, not wished away. Outliers are questioned until they confess weather or seeing. Priors expand when the data insists and tighten when cadence holds. A too pretty curve may be refused if thin cloud faked the rise. The ledger records nights traded for clarity and mornings spent reweighing points until the plot tells the truth. Hardware and access form the second bill. Lines near the detection floor ask for larger mirrors and longer integrations. Proposals must compete fairly with other sky priorities. Calibration multiplies, flats for each filter, darks across temperatures, standards every night. Pipelines written for intersystem comets grow branches for interstellar quirks, then are tested until they creak less and measure more. Communication carries its own tariff. Each time worse appears, it is chained to a model that failed, not floated as mood music. Plots keep their scars, error bars, confidence bands, and the points that refuse to behave. The narration teaches how to read them. Legible uncertainty is not weakness. It is the bridge between public attention and scientific caution that does not patronize. Policy thresholds remain visible by design. Language hardens only if gates open. Astrometric residuals swell beyond tolerance. Brightness surges by orders rather than steps, or radar geometry slides into range. None has occurred. Calm is not a habit. It is a conclusion retested nightly. By naming these gates, the film shows how an alert would look if the sky ever asked for one. Comparative context charges a conceptual fee. Oumuamua, forced acceptance of a push without a visible coma. Borisov restored classroom sanity with classic behavior. 3, I divided by Atlas stands between obeying gravity and then editing it with jets. The cost is abandoning single recipe thinking. The dividend is a spectrum of possibilities wide enough to house visitors we have not yet imagined meeting. Revision is another quiet expense. Each updated ephemeris ripples outward slit placements, exposure budgets, even press lines. The film normalizes this churn. Retraction is not failure. It is scheduled maintenance on truth. Provisional numbers are mile markers, not monuments. When traffic proves the paint wrong, the road is repainted and the trip continues without apology. Social logistics add to the tally. Amateur networks, gift redundancy, and weather immunity, but need coordination and credit. Professional teams share standards in near real time, resisting the reflex to guard incremental gains. The reward is a braided light curve and spectra stitched across longitudes. Science pays an ego to earn clarity in result. That exchange is unglamorous and essential. Budgeting the unknown becomes a discipline of its own. Teams bank time around perihelion and reserve some for the long glide toward the distant Earth passage. Code is profiled for the slowest step. Storage is allotted for stacks that may never be used. Plans assume surprises, so surprises are cheaper. Logistics are shown not for spectacle, but to reveal what rigor actually costs. What remains is a stance rather than a slogan. 3, I divided by Atlas is tracked within a broadened model that names its pressures and admits its limits. The sky will edit these lines again, and the campaign will let it. Worth stays tied to simplicity's failure. Wrong is a past tense we escape by measuring. The price of learning is paid. The receipts are kept. The night still open. Post-perihelion, the geometry steadies. Phase angles soften. Air mass improves. And the tail's thin filaments separate from background grain by grain. Mid-December brings the distant Earth passage, a vantage that favors precise astrometry over spectacle. Cadence becomes the instrument. Many small mirrors keeping the beat, large apertures stepping in. When the coma thins enough for honest spectra, the plan prizes continuity, not drama. Gaps are treated as risks, not as narrative pauses. Progress has simple metrics. A rotation solution that survives changes in aperture and method. Line ratios that settle into ladders instead of swaying with each night. Non-gravitational terms that taper as activity wanes, validating the thrust models used before the turn. Each success shrinks priors, trims residuals, and moves numbers from provisional ranges into values that can travel across pipelines without losing their shape. Surprises also have rules. A real outburst must clear noise, repeat across sites, and persist under a second unromantic look. A torque claim must ride on phase resolve photometry that disagrees with simpler fits. A late appearing volatile must anchor in lines that reappear when geometry favors them. The film names these thresholds so that astonishment, if it comes, is earned rather than staged. Public framing remains exact. Worse continues to mean worse for simplicity, not worse for safety. The orbit is behaving within a broadened model. Hazard language has no trigger to pull. The narration separates captions from curves, reminding viewers that a famous name attached to a claim is not evidence. Evidence is the plot on screen points, lines, errors, and whether they hold the same story after a week. There is a quieter lesson under the logistics. Interstellar guests tutor pace as much as physics. They reward publishing limits, widening error bands when nights disagree, and retracting a neat period that dies under better seeing. They penalize certainty that runs ahead of data. This discipline is not dour. It is freedom from panic. It lets curiosity breathe without borrowing courage from alarm. When the windows close, the archive opens. 3. I divided by Atlas will leave ephemerides. Others can test. Spectra others can re-reduce. And a ledger of methods that admits where they tore and where they held. That is the answer the headline was pointing toward. We were wrong in ways that made us better. It was worse only for our shortcuts. The sky stays complicated, indifferent, and generous, exactly the teacher it has always been.